Welcome to MindWise Video Podcast, which presents holistic mental health, healthcare, and wellness perspectives and information. I am your host, Ron Parks, MD, writer, teacher, and consultant. Today's video podcast is about collaboration. Is it friend or foe in making critical choices? What is the cure for indecisiveness when you can't make decisions in personal, business, or now in political matters? There is, I believe, an art in being more decisive. It requires your developing your innate inner resources and collaboration with trusted others. What follows is several personal vignettes and discussion to highlight what to consider and do to be better guided when having to make important choices. Mentoring or biased advice. Recently, in a conversation with my adult son, I wanted to better understand the benefits versus the risks of collaboration with others during times of challenge and indecision. My son was in the throngs of indecision about whether to return to graduate school or not. As a parent, one often finds oneself in the problematic place of wanting to give advice, but knowing that if taken by your child, you might get blamed if things go awry and may not have supported their growth of self-confidence and independence, which all parents want for their child. Our conversation concerned the value of my son calling and collaborating with his graduate school educators about what they were offering regarding courses and support. Doing so would help him better assess if returning would be in his best interests, but is seeking help or collaboration from others always the best consideration? Making a discerning choice between two or more options is sometimes fraught with the potential of being misguided. Psychologists have called it a double bind when one gets stuck and not knowing which way to go, creating fear of the consequences of a possible poor choice. We all face these dilemmas and indecisive moments that may become protracted with undue worry, evolving into despair and health problems, health breakdown, physical, mental, and spiritual, with the loss of zest for living, ability for adaptive change, or to thrive. Also, during times of challenge, our awareness of our human limitations and vulnerabilities comes to the forefront, and we can only know what we have learned and with an occasional intuitive glimpse at future possibilities or outcomes. With age and wisdom, at least for me, it has become apparent that help is often available by reaching out to others. Collaboration with others may be easy for some than others. Ease with social communication can vary widely from person to person. Someone who has experienced significant trauma for others might be more reluctant to be trustful. Some may uniquely function best and express their talents by working alone without pressure or distraction. Example would be those with a talent genetic predisposition to work and perform better when they can maximize their concentration without distraction from their environment or social interactions. People with such neurodiversity can be best researchers, analysts, tech specialists, physicians, mechanics, artists, and other fields, requiring exceptional intellectual ability to combine diverse data and elements for unique solutions for complex problems. Going from the frying pan into the fire when adversity prompted flight, perhaps the best I could do considering the circumstances. When I was young, in the earlier phase of my medical specialty training, I started into a residency graduate program at one of the prestigious institutes in the Midwest. I felt fortunate and privileged to get into what I thought was such an outstanding program. A relative of my wife was a leading neurosurgeon in our city and spoke highly of the program and how it had got his career off to a successful start. Coming from a modest, industrious family with few members who had gotten medical, graduate, or college degrees, it was a big jump for me. I had trepidations about getting accepted in such a well-known residency training that was quite rigorous and demanding. Believe it or not, the day before I left with my wife for our new destination in the Midwestern city, I met an older physician who had been in the same program that I was to begin. When I brought up proudly that I was going to start there also, he became upset with a lot of expressed anger towards his former training program. He said the pressure there was intense, triggering intense anxiety, and it was difficult for him to sleep or focus. It reached a point where he went to the psychiatry department there for some help. According to him, he was immediately dismissed when the residency program discovered it. He had to return home and restart his career and training at a local institution. So whatever my trepidations or fear, they increased maybe 1,000% before I left for my new training opportunity. Earlier in my career, I had some difficulty with anxiety and occasional panic attacks, which I thought I'd learned to manage. When my wife and I arrived in the quiet, conservative Midwestern town, home to the new internal medicine residency, we were well received and befriended by another physician on the faculty there and his family, who were from our hometown area. I admired him and his work in preventative medicine and research and thought this might be an area for me to pursue. A rigorous schedule began for me in my training, including night calls, and I felt the stress with mounting anxiety and increasing irritable bowel syndrome, especially as I was on the run all the time and grabbing snacks. I did not realize then how gluten sensitive I was. It was a time when I could have received some wise counseling or guidance beyond the small circle of friends that my wife and I had. Of course, I was terrified of what the older former trainee previously at the same institution had told me about being dismissed from the program when he reached out for help. Also, several of my fellow physicians there were up in arms about the weaknesses and abuses they felt from the program. The faculty physician I knew there was away on a sabbatical, so I thought I had to be resourceful. I needed to seek a better situation on my own. With my wife's support, I got on the phone. I called some of the top masters of public health and preventive medicine programs on the East and West Coast. I thought I would pursue an academic career as a physician, as the physician I had befriended on the current program's faculty. One physician I reached was the head of the preventive medicine program at UCLA in Los Angeles. He was amazed that I called at that moment, and when he heard of my plight, he said that he had just gotten a grant for a new training position and asked how I could transition out there and how soon. My wife and I had pulled together in a fantastic collaboration we have had in a short amount of time. I resigned from the residency program. I told them about my acceptance into a new program and my desire to attend it. The residency program director said they had more than 200 other resident trainees and could accommodate me for the new position. We got a rental truck, packed all our belongings, and got to Los Angeles in 2 weeks. It was a bit of a hectic trip, I got to admit. When we arrived, I was warmly greeted by my new boss and head of the department at UCLA. As he could not get me a paycheck immediately, believe it or not, he reached into his pocket and gave me some cash to tide us over for a few days. I felt immediately at home and well supported. But the quick transition would take a toll on my psyche that I could have not expected. From the beginning, I found things disappointing in the new program, such as lacking the content, structure, and training I had expected. I fretted that I had not given enough consideration to my choice by not doing enough investigation or consulting others. I felt increasingly anxious, with my thoughts racing to find some helpful solutions, and I had difficulty relaxing or sleeping. Venting with the calming influence my wife or talking with close friends in the area did not help. I felt terrified and insecure that maybe I had ruined my career with an impulsive decision. I knew I had to seek help, so I took a deep breath and made an appointment with a psychiatrist in the student health program. Once I reached out for help, I actually felt some relief. It was my great fortune that the person assigned to me was very understanding, humanistic, and listened with compassion. She astutely observed that I was more angry than anxious, probably with myself, but mainly with the program for not meeting my expectations, especially with my prior training and academic background. The psychiatrist I saw was not arrogant, didn't label me or pigeonhole me into some diagnosis to be able to medicate me, but was there to allow me some space and time for insight with her collaboration and support. I felt very understood and validated. I almost immediately felt clarification of my dilemma and the direction to take. Most importantly, I felt relief from my worry and anxiety. It was kind of like a one-session wonder as I fell quickly back to normal. The door remained open from her if I needed to talk more in the future. The psychiatrist actually was a role model for me when I went into psychiatry later in my career. Also, my longtime friend Jay suggested a part-time clinical job at the LA County Hospital Emergency Room, where he was training, the busiest hospital emergency room in the country. Re-engaging in some clinical work was very helpful and grounding. Getting in touch with my feelings, especially anger, helped me get unstuck and to act. Almost directly, I went to the new department's faculty and head of the department, where I vehemently expressed my concerns and disappointment. With my assertiveness, additions and modifications occurred from the program, making the program more workable and valuable to my needs. It became an excellent program for me and helped to launch my career in areas suitable for my interests and talents. Perhaps it is a lengthy story, but it makes a point about the value of collaboration, seeking help and guidance at critical junctures when feeling overwhelmed, where two heads might be better than isolation and your own reasoning. There are two sides, the positive and negative of advice, influence, and collaboration with others. As indeed in some situations, it can be counterproductive or even destructive. There's always the danger of losing one's agency, free will, or inner integrity when under the unhealthy influence of a significant other. In today's world, the risk of dependence on trusting others who are strong influencers that can affect our choices, decisions, and life direction is especially critical as the time of growth of the media and the power of influential people that use self-serving propaganda, such as seen in cults and ideological or political movements. Some even depend on AI, search engines, or programs like Google for information or guidance, which can be misleading or erroneous. The paradox of my favorite mentor advice is to never give anybody advice. In the early years of my training, one of my best-loved mentors, Sam, gently guided me in the art of listening and following the other person to find their inner voice, perspective, purpose, and meaning. When I had to leave and move into a new city and program, he warmly embraced me and with a smirk, teasingly told me his last nickel pearl was never to give anyone advice. The role of an advisor, therapist, and teacher or expert in the field as I learned from my favorite mentor, Sam, was to be an excellent, compassionate listener and collaborator, to allow the space for insight, learning, and healing to occur through healthy dialogue and collaboration. Evaluating the value or potential risks of choosing a different path based on the influence of another. It may be hard to judge choices influenced by others until the time has passed and we can better assess the impact of a critical decision at a vital life juncture. I remember when I was early in college at a vital life juncture, I remember I was under a lot of stress then, adjusting to the challenges of my new demanding life situation. I befriended and maybe came under the influence of a more senior student who had left school for a couple of years to study and live in an Israeli kibbutz. He said the experience had changed his life. He started working with me on how I could access and sign up for the same program as he did. I became enamored with the idea and romance of getting out, or perhaps escaping from the drudgery of my early college challenge, dropping out and going abroad. I shared my dilemma with one of my older admired brothers on a visit home. He was aghast at my thoughts of doing so, as we came from a very modest, hardworking family where opportunities for education and career were a luxury available only to a few of us. Our dialogue or collaboration sobered me and made me reflect on the pros and cons of not completing the educational track I had started because of deep fears of not being good enough to succeed in a traditional academic track. As it ended up, I stayed the course. It all led to my career and work, which has been gratifying. I cannot say that at my current age that time will tell or it's worth having any lingering regrets that the other path would have been a better life choice. Collaboration with a trusted other prevented me from falling under the unsavory influence of a famous yoga guru. Another time, when I was a year away from completing my medical residency, I studied when the opportunity arose. The well-known established yoga teacher and guru had established quite a following. Some of his followers invited my wife and I to a retreat in the mountains of Pennsylvania. There was a strong flavor of merriment and celebration, the awe of the teacher and what he represented, spiritual oneness and admiration for the exotic, organic, healthy foods, movement classes and exercise, including yoga and meditation practices. I felt intoxicated by him and was excited to be invited to his quarters for a meeting. The excitement made my head spin a little. He was establishing a more significant holistic yoga-oriented health center in the mountains on his large retreat-like center property. He offered me a cottage for free where my wife and I could live if I left my current medical residency program. I would not be paid for my professional service there and would only receive room and board for my wife and myself. Also, I would be one of his trainees and disciples. Boy, did I feel special and excited, and told him I would consider it. I left his cottage on the hill and descended the well-kept and flowery path down to the bottom of the retreat site, feeling euphoric and giddy. My wife joined me on the path, and I excitedly told her the story. My wife has always been my most valued confidant and collaborator when faced with hard choices. In a few words, she deflated the influence of the highly esteemed yoga guru, or perhaps a cult leader. I do not remember Jan's exact words, but they might have been, "Are you crazy? You're only 1 year from completing your specialty training." My trust and openness to her collaboration brought me back to a more sensible reality, which he had done more than a few times at critical junctures during our marriage. These were times when I was more challenged by inner conflict and turmoil and not totally in touch with the larger perspective. With time, do I regret my choices to continue my career path? Here, not at all, as I incorporated much of my learning from my later developed work and teachings in holistic and integrative medicine. Tips and points to ponder. Realize the importance of collaboration with others, but always be aware of being over-influenced by another with agendas that may not be in your best interest. Advice givers often have biased opinions that do not always support the most beneficial and ideal choices for you. Avoid getting entrapped by your or another's logic, shallow perspective, and partial or rigid thinking. With more openness, input, or feedback from your intuition, inner wisdom, and sensibility, or trusted others, and outside resources, you can gain greater perspective and flexibility and find better options to make discerning choices. 2. Develop the art of accessing the mind and consciousness' wide, intuitive, and rational aspects. Establish ease in moving to the inner peaceful place where clear-minded reflection is possible, away from the turbulent or overthinking mind, worrying, configuring, constructing, planning, strategizing, etc. The ability to move to that quiet place of reflection comes naturally for some, and others requires practice and study by oneself or with a teacher. The benefits are immense and perhaps essential for mental, spiritual, and physical health, balance, and well-being. Thank you for your interest in the above topic. Please share with others. Your ideas and comments are welcome. Thanks to Sean Parks, editor and project manager for Park Press, for his invaluable collaboration in developing and editing the final article. Subscribe to my Substack newsletter and podcast at www.inmindwise.com. All content is created and published for educational purposes only. It should not be considered as a substitute for professional or medical service or guidance. Always seek your healthcare provider's care regarding medical or mental health conditions. This communication is not intended to provide medical diagnosis, recommendations, treatment, or endorsements. Thank you.